Ladies and gentlemen, the stage is set, the mics are on. It's time for ProAm Predictions, with your hosts, introducing first Fan of the Amateur Corner, tipping the scales at the heavyweight limit, with a fight record of 0 wins and 2 defeats, fighting out of Cork, presenting Paul O.D. Sitting across the desk, fighting out of the professional corner, weighing in 135 pounds, with a professional fight record of 13 wins and 7 defeats. The Pride of Wexford, presenting Brian the Pike Man Moore.
Hello and welcome back to the ProAm Predictions. I am Paul O.D., representing the amateur side, and of course on the pro side, as always, I'm joined by Brian the Pike Man Moore of Bellator fame. How are you doing today, Brian?
I'm great, Paul. I just had received my bout contract, so I'm in right form now. I don't even have time to sign it because I'm doing this, so we'll have to make this a quick one, yeah?
Yeah. We do have to touch on our little intro that we just saw there. What do you make of the intro?
Unreal, unbelievable. But I have to say, right, to anyone who mightn't know, I come on here for half an hour a week, and that's my job done. But it's yourself that does all the editing, so you really deserve all this. But yeah, hats off. I love it.
To be fair, I think it's quite clear watching the clips that there is athleticism on both sides of the party. Like it's not a one-way street. I think I showed my capabilities as well.
You showed something.
I showed a lot of myself, to be fair.
No, I loved it. I thought it was fucking quality.
Very good. Look, if you're enjoying our videos and you're following us so far, please subscribe to the YouTube channel for MMA content made by fans for the fans. Hit the bell to be informed when our videos go live. And we do have to get into some fights. It is UFC 259, the start of March Madness. We've touched on this for the last few weeks, and this is a phenomenal card. Do you want to start at the top, or do you want to start at I suppose maybe the feature prelim?
Let's start with the feature prelim, work the way up. Let's leave the best to last, as they say. But do you want to touch on last week's picks and bets before we do that?
Yeah, no problem. I had a good week last week. I've no problem touching on the picks.
I know.
Yeah,
my disclaimer. Yeah, go ahead.
You'll see we put up the card that we're going to be putting up our picks live every week, and they're not great yet, but I'm getting there. I'm on 12 and 19. Now you're 14 and 17. But you are, to be fair, winning on the bet side of things. So I suppose that's what matters. You have more money in your pocket, or less money taken out of your pocket, as it were.
Yeah, the latter. Definitely less money taken out rather than money. But this is what I'm going to say. This is my little disclaimer. So since we've started this, I physically haven't put money down on bets, which I usually do. But this week I'm starting March Madness. Okay. Now it's getting serious for me, because what I'm giving my bets of the week is money that I'm actually going to put down. So look for the safest bets you can imagine coming up in the next few weeks. But yeah, I can't wait for this spot. We've talked about it for weeks. Don't get me wrong, 2021 has been phenomenal so far. It's been unbelievable. But here we are in March. This fucking card is phenomenal.
Yeah, it's top to bottom. It's a stacked card. And we are going to start at the feature prelim. You have Dominic Cruz taking on Casey Kenny. Dominic Cruz on a 2-fight skid, the 2 losses to Cejudo and Garbrandt. And actually, we released a video today on our YouTube channel. That's UFC 259 behind the tape. It gives some of the stats on some of the fights and just some interesting facts that you might not know. So go check that out as well. But one of the facts on it was Dominic Cruz hasn't won a fight in 1,737 days. And it's the longest any ranked fighter has gone without a win in the promotion's history. Now, I found this very interesting. Dominic Cruz is actually 5-2 overall in the UFC. You feel like he's been around forever, but he's only 7 fights with the promotion. And on the other side, you have Casey Kenny, who's very new to the promotion. He's on a 3-fight win streak. His only losses to Merab Dvalishvili, who's a monster. and he is 5-1 in the UFC, so he has 6 fights already in a short space of time. And I just see, I see that little bit of a experience in the sense that he's been really active of late. I see that being the difference here. And for me, I think Casey Kenny picks up a relatively easy decision against Dominic Cruz. And I can actually, I'll go out a little bit further, and I can see Dominic Cruz hanging him up after this one.
Really?
What do you make of this fight?
I think I think maybe if Dominic does go out there and takes a loss, you could be very right about the hanging up the gloves, because he has a great career in commentary, and he breaks down fights brilliantly. I think anytime Dominic Cruz opens his mouth, people want to hear what he says, but I don't think this is the end for him. You spoke about experience, and you're talking about a man who's had a lot of fights. I know, like, we're almost looking at Casey Kenny as this kind of young, hungry up and comer, and he's a young guy, but he's plenty of experience. But Dominic far outweighs that with championship experience, with 5-round experience. Even I know this is only a 3-round fight, but he's been like fighting the upper echelon for a very long time, and I think the 3 rounds will suit him. Again, a man who doesn't believe in ring rust either. I think that he'll go out with a big point to prove after such a long duration out. And this is not his first time where he's came back and looked phenomenal. Yeah. And I'm expecting the same performance as that we're so used to seeing Cruz in. I think that he'll have a chip on his shoulder too, but not getting a top contender. Yeah. So I think Cruz comes out. I think he uses that great IQ to see out a very not a dominant, but a very good, clear-cut 15-minute performance, and I think he decisions Casey Kenny here in this.
I'm very interested that you said that you think the 3-round will suit him. I think, if anything, the fact that he has all of that 5-round experience, I think transitioning back to 3 rounds and being away for so long, I think the pace might just off-put him a little bit, because Casey brings the heat. He comes fast, he comes out of the traps, and he's custom built for a 3-round fight. And I just think the damage could be done very early in this fight, and come towards the end of round 2, as Cruz is kind of finding his feet in there. I think it could be curtains already at that point with regards to the scorecards.
Yeah, perhaps. I just look at Cruz, and anyone to look at Cruz's style, you'd think with his elusive footwork, and it's just well-rounded style. He's not someone who gets takedowns and holds you down. He's always in mad scrambles. Looking at a style, you think 5 would suit him, but I just think that his fight IQ of putting someone against the fence, of landing shots and not taking too much damage, I think he'll just he'll outpoint rather than cause massive devastation here in this. But I think the 3 rounds just seems like a much more obviously condensed time frame than the 25.
Yeah,
where he'll do enough to beat, and I think he'll do quite enough to beat Kenny in this.
Yeah, and with that, we'll move on to the main card. You have opening up the main card. You have a phenomenal fight at light heavyweight. You have Thiago Santos taking on Alexander Rakic. Santos, of course, coming off the 2 losses. He had the loss to Glover Teixeira most recently, and then you go back to the loss to Jones, which was a bit of a questionable one, and there's injuries involved there. And you on the other side, you have Rakic, who's coming off a decision win over Anthony Smith. Previous to the last Ozdemir, he had a 12-fight win streak, and there's a lot of hype around this guy. He's 5-1 in the UFC, and people are talking about him like he's a future champion. I personally think this is a very, very difficult test. I think Santos is just one of those guys that we saw in that John Jones performance, when he was essentially on one leg for most of that fight. Yeah. The toughness and the sheer will to win. Now, the Glover one is a little bit different. He got submitted. I don't think Rakic has that in his arsenal to take him out with a submission. He obviously has submission victories, but I just don't think at that level. For me, personally, I can see Santos getting a finish in this one, but it will be a back-and-forth fight, and I think it'll be just a phenomenal one for the opening 2 rounds.
It's a fantastic fight, and it's an excellent way of opening up the main card. And like, you look at fights that are on the prelims, you look at what we just spoke about, Dominic Cruz, Casey Kenny, you look at Joseph Benavidez and Askarov, and you're wondering how are these guys not on the main card. But then you look at Rakic and Santos here, and you're kind of, I think they've lined it out really well. I love this fight. It's just going to be about how Thiago Santos bounces back after such a long period away. And I'm going to go erratic on this one. I'm going to go against you on this. Surprise, surprise. I love Santos, and I personally prefer him as a fan to win, just because the heart that he demonstrates in fights that we've been able to see. But I think Racic he has momentum. He's looked incredible in his last few fights. People are talking about him contending for titles. In fact, I think he beats the current light heavyweight champ.
Yeah.
You know, and but I don't think the current light heavyweight champ will be current light heavyweight champ.
We will get to that.
Yeah. Spoiler alert. But yeah, I'm going to go with Racic on this one. Does he get the finish? I don't know. I probably against a less tough opponent. I would say. I think his striking is really nice. He's very diverse in his striking. He's technical, yet at the same time he's kind of unorthodox. You don't really know what the guy is going to be throwing. I like that about him. But it's going to be great. It's going to be a great fight. Wouldn't surprise me if either man got the knockout. Don't think there's going to be any submission in it. But I'm going to go Racic on this one, just based with his momentum.
Yeah. The one caveat I would say to my pick is that I'm a huge fan of Rakic, and I think he has all the capabilities of being a future champion. I'm just concerned about the level of opponent he's faced so far. Anthony Smith obviously is a former title challenger, but he hasn't looked himself of late. And the worry, of course, is that loss to Ozdemir, and I don't think, again, Ozdemir is at that elite level. I just think Santos has faced much tougher competition. He's been in there for 5-round fights. He's fought for the belt. I think experience will be the deciding factor here, and he will catch him late on.
Yeah, they're absolutely excellent points, and it's one of the reasons why I'm not putting money on this fight. It's one of the reasons, like, now that I'm back putting money on fights from this weekend onwards, I love the fights where you don't put money on it, where you can just sit back, take it in, and admire a fight like this, that you're just going to be entertained, you know. And this is a perfect example of just an entertaining fight, and perfect way of opening up the main card.
100%. And speaking of entertaining fights, we have Islam Makhachev against Drew Dober. And like, if you talk to anyone in the know about MMA, everyone seems to believe that Makhachev is the second coming, and he's this guy that's going to run through the division. Now, I have my doubts as to whether he can be the next Khabib or whether he can dominate to that level, but I think this stylistic matchup is perfect for him. Islam's on a 6-fight win streak. Drew Dober himself is on a 3-fight win streak, but he has that loss to Beneil Dariush. Drew Dober's last 3 fights, TKO wins over Hernandez, Hasprat, Polo Reyes. The one thing I would say, even though I'm siding with Makhachev, and I think Makhachev takes a decision in this one, Makhachev has never fought someone that is currently ranked. Like, he's fought guys that were up there at one point, but he's never fought a ranked opponent, and he's ranked quite highly himself. I just think Dober's been in there with tougher guys, but I think Makhachev ekes out a decision in this one.
I'm in full agreement, but again, I just can't wait to see this fight. I think Drew Dober isn't getting enough credit for what he's done as of late. You know, he lost to Dariush. Dariush is an animal, and that's another guy who doesn't get enough soot. You know what I mean? These guys are excellent, but I think I really like Makhachev. I think his style is phenomenal. He's really good everywhere. His wrestling, his trips, his throws are beautiful, and I'm just expecting a dominant performance.
Yeah,
I do expect it. Even though I'm a fan of Drew Dober, I just expect a 30-27, perhaps 30-26 across the board. I think Makhachev, you were correct in saying that he hasn't fought a top 10 as such yet. But I think this is even though we're all well aware of who he is, but I think he takes a big leap in progression here, and it'll set him up really nice for his next fight. But I have Makhachev, big decision here.
Yeah, the one question I did want to ask you here, given the shape and the landscape of the lightweight division at the moment, what do one of these guys have to do in this fight to put themselves in that discussion and to make themselves put themselves in that top 6 discussion, I suppose, of the people that everyone is talking about that's going to be fighting for the title? Obviously, there's hype behind Makhachev, so maybe there's more of a lean in his direction. But we saw that Beneil Dariush picked up a huge win, and then he's still not in the discussion, and he's not being talked about for those opportunities.
As someone who personally is in a very high level a division with a load of killers, you have 2 choices. You can keep winning, or you can win in style and have less wins. Do you understand? So what I mean is, like, you could rack up 8 wins in a row, and people are going to start noticing you. Or you could put 2 or 3 back-to-back wins in and put on unbelievable like performances and displays and finishes, and that'll get you noticed too. So, Makhachev, he might have to play the long game in this, because I don't think he's a finisher as such, but he is a damn good, well-rounded mixed martial artist. And I think that he'll show that in this fight. I again, though, I think it's going to be a decision. I don't think he knocks him out. I don't think he submits him, although I do see him being very dominant in this. But the lightweight division in the UFC is stacked. So you need to try and stand out. And I think Islam will do it with his record and his continuous win streak.
Yeah. We do have to start with the title fights now. And the first title fight on the night is the bantamweight title fight. You have Peter Yan defending his belt for the first time against Aljamain Sterling. Peter Yan, of course, on a 10-fight win streak. His last 3 opponents, Aldo by TKO, Faber by KO, and Rivera by decision. Aljamain himself is on a 5-fight win streak since his KO loss to Moraes. His last 3, Sandhagen by submission, Munoz by decision, Rivera by decision. These guys are fighting the elite of the elite. For me, I think Aljamain holds the edge in the level of competition he's faced off against. And I think he's fighting younger guys. I think he's fighting the new wave of the division. And I just see him having more tools in this fight with regards to he has the grappling and the unorthodox striking. I can see Aljamain picking up a bit. I don't know if it's too much of a shock, but I can see him picking up a shock victory in this one, perhaps by submission.
It'll be a shock if he wins by submission. If he wins straight out, I can't see it being a shock. I don't think the odds makers think it's too much of a shock either. They're pretty tight odds, as I understand. Ask me who my favorite fighter in the UFC bantamweight division is, I'm going to tell you Peter Yan. Ask me the person who I study the most in the UFC bantamweight division, it's Peter Yan. But who's going to win this fight? I think it's Aljamain Sterling. I think he has so many tools, but it's not even that. I think stylistically, it's not a good matchup for Yan, in my opinion. These top 5 guys could fight each other and would have different outcomes, and the MMA mat would make no sense. Do you know what I mean? But I think this is just it's a nightmare matchup for Yan. But one thing that I can't shake out of my mind is he's moved teams for this championship fight, not out of wanting to, but out of circumstance with COVID. Yeah, it was absolutely a necessity. Aljamain Sterling, however, has been rooted to where he travels around. Don't get me wrong, and he's very good with that. He's able to accumulate different sparring partners from around the globe. He's trained in SPG before, but his roots are with Matt Serra, and he's been able to train there consistently. While I think Peter Yan's had to kind of rush a camp, be put in with a lot of different new bodies, and I'm wondering what that has it played any part in the psyche of Peter Yan in this fight. Yeah, he's become champion in his own camp, Tiger Muay Thai, and basing it from Russia and Thailand. I think the cards are just stacking a little against him on this. And add to that, I think Yan has the most beautiful striking style. I think his wrestling is great. But I think Aljamain's size, his strength are 2 factors, but his excellent wrestling and fantastic grappling, his unorthodox striking, it's going to be very hard to read. If it's a straight up kickboxing match, Yan wins. But Yan has the threat of these unorthodox kicks to takedowns, kicks to set up his punches. He's like someone's quoted as the bantamweight John Jones, and it is kind of correct. John Jones in his early days, he didn't know what he was going to throw. Sterling kind of has that little bit of aura
swagger about him,
yeah. And for those reasons, I think Sterling becomes the champ. And I almost feel bad because I think Yan is just I'm a huge fan of Yan. I'm a huge fan of Sterling too, but I think it's Sterling's time.
Yeah. In the next bout, of course, the co-main event of the evening, you have Amanda Nunes, possibly pound for pound number 1 for me for in men and women, is defending her featherweight title against Megan Anderson. Amanda Nunes on an 11-fight win streak, and let's just touch on some of the wins she's had in that time. Jermaine Durandamy, Holly Holm, Ronda Rousey, Chris Cyborg, Misha Tate, Shevchenko twice. I could go on and on. about the level of competition she's faced across 2 divisions, and she's going in against Megan Anderson, who is, if Megan Anderson wins, would become the 3rd biggest underdog victory in the history of the sport. Megan, of course, on a 2-fight win streak, looked very impressive last year with a knockout victory. But she has that submission loss to Felicia Spencer. She has that loss to Home. I think it's a massive uphill battle against Amanda. And I do see Amanda finishing her, but I think Megan will make it difficult. I don't think it'll be a first-round finish. I think it'll be 2-3 rounds, and Megan will show her toughness and she'll show good striking. But for me, I just think it's a little bit too much for Megan Anderson this time out.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement. And I you almost feel bad for Megan when Megan Anderson, when you look at the odds being so against her, nobody's giving her a chance.
Yeah.
The only thing that I'm thinking is, look at, firstly, 2 excellent fighters, but again, Amanda Nunes, the people who she's been in with, pound for pound, in my opinion, as well, the best fighter on the planet right now. I'm thinking of 2 things. I'm thinking of, number one, is there a chance she's taking her lightly? Is there a chance that her preparation has been less? She's fought such big names, and like you mentioned, she would have been up for that. And maybe she's looking at Anderson as an easy one, and maybe as a result, that's made her preparation poor or her mindset poor. I don't think so. She's a champion for a reason. She's at the very upper echelon, both as an athlete, but in her mindset too. So I don't think that'll be a factor. The other factor is she's a new mother. Does that have an effect? Anyone who's a parent will know what the effects that how different life is. So does that have an effect? Again, I don't think so. So I'm kind of clutching at straws to try and find a route to maybe see, is there a chance for Anderson? But the bottom line, I don't think so. I think Amanda is just out on her own.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a big fan of Megan Anderson. Her style I really like as well. I think she's a fantastic fighter. But I think Amanda Nunes is on the top of the pile here.
Yeah, and it's interesting there. It's a testament to Amanda's skill set that we're looking for variables that might cause an upset, as opposed to the fact that Anderson has the skill set to beat her. What I do want to ask about Amanda Nunes, can you see her continuing her career at 145? Because, of course, this is her 2nd consecutive defense at 145, and she hasn't moved back down now in a while. There doesn't appear to be anything right now jumping off the page at bantamweight. Do you see this as a pattern, and perhaps we might see an interim title in the bantamweight division in the near future, given that we haven't seen her there in just over a year?
Yeah, look, we're assuming she's going to go out and beat and finish Megan. We're going to assume that Megan doesn't put on a phenomenal performance or dethrone her or put up a fight worthy of a rematch.
Yeah.
And if we are assuming correctly, I think a drop back down is inevitable, because you look at the contenders in the division, there's none of them that are screaming that they are right next in line. Even for me, one of my favorite fighters is Holly Holm, and her last fight wasn't ultra impressive in my opinion, as much as she's just a fantastic fighter and athlete. So I think her move back down for stiffer tests is inevitable. Actually, what you said, if she wins, it'll be the 3rd biggest upset. I'm assuming Matt Serra is number 1 or 2. What's the other one?
Matt Serra is number 2, and Shayna Dobson last year with her win over Maria Agapova is number 1.
Oh, I thought you meant then title fight. Sorry.
No. Just in fights overall, which in and of itself is an even bigger statistic.
Yeah. Jesus. Yeah. Well, yeah. And what do you find? Do you find that Amanda will be bouncing back between 35-45, or do you think she's going to try and stick one or the other, an interim title? What do you think is going to happen?
See, this is it. Like you said, that there is nothing in either division right now that jumps off the page, and maybe less so at featherweight, because we don't actually have a division at featherweight. There is the fight booked between Felicia Spencer and Danielle Wolfe. Danielle Wolfe is 1-0 in MMA. She's a massive amateur boxing career behind her, but I think she's been completely thrown to the wolves against Felicia Spencer. And perhaps that's an opportunity for Felicia Spencer to come out, make a statement, and go and try and get a rematch against Amanda Nunes. But at bantamweight, I don't know. I just think the fact that she's defended the belt twice at featherweight now, I don't know if the interest is there to go back down to bantamweight. She's beaten all the top girls there. unless someone becomes a clear contender in the next few months. But I just struggle to see it. I think she's happier not to be cutting down. She's put on a bigger frame now. She's a bigger girl. I can see her sticking it out at featherweight
Staying.
if the contenders are there for her to fight. And I think she's happy to fight once a year, maybe twice a year going forward. She's solidified her status as a legend in the sport, so I don't think she needs to be out 2-3 times a year.
I'm wondering, you know, if we're thinking the same, like if that's the mindset of fighting once a year, fighting twice a year. I wonder is retirement far away, because she could exit the sport now, and like you said, her legacy stays perfectly intact
At the very top,
you know.
yeah.
It's what she's just a fighter that nobody can question. Do you
Yeah.
know what I mean? There's always questions with some fighters, and you'll have fans that will say hit this, that, and the other. But with her resume is unbelievable. You know, so but it would be. Sorry,
I think the only question mark over Amanda Nunes is the trilogy with Shevchenko. Yes, she holds 2 victories over her, but there is that asterisk alongside the second one. A lot of people scored it in Shevchenko's favor. I personally didn't. I thought Nunes just about won that fight, but it is certainly one that the fans do want to see again somewhere down the line. So maybe that's the move down to bantamweight, and we get to see that fight before she leaves the sport. I think that does happen again before she retires.
If again, assuming she gets past Megan Anderson, that would be the fight I'd like to see next straight away. Both girls are absolutely phenomenal, and forget talking about pound for pound rankings for women. Pound for pound rankings overall, men and women, those two are right up there. They're absolutely unbelievable. They're huge fight IQ, enormous skill set. Just anytime they fight, I'll be watching. They're unbelievable.
For sure. And hopefully that one gets booked soon. We do have to talk about the main event. It is champion versus champion. Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. Undefeated champion moves up in weight to take on Polish Power. 4-fight win streak. This is a phenomenal one. I'm so hyped for this fight. I like, for the people that are watching in America, when we watch the fights, it's on at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in the morning. I'll watch this fight and I won't be able to sleep for hours and hours after. I know for a fact. You have Adesanya, who's 9-0 in the UFC, aiming to become a double champion, like I said. And we look at some of the victories he's had in his short stint in the UFC. He has Paulo Costa, Yoel Romero, Robert Whittaker, Anderson Silva, Kelvin Gastelum, all huge names. Jan Blachowicz has a 4-fight win streak, but of course he has that TKO loss to Santos. And if you go back earlier in his career, it was a bit shaky. At one point, he was 1-4 in the division, and it took him a while to find his feet. I just believe, and I know a lot of people have the same opinion when it comes to Izzy. I just believe Izzy is on a different level if you take the weight out of it. The big question mark in this fight, and Adesanya came out this week and said he's going to be weighing in at around 193 to 195 pounds, which is, it adds to the mystery, of course. The big question mark is the weight. Can he handle that power if he does get clipped? And is he big enough, and is he quick enough to avoid everything? I think he is. I think Adesanya puts on his best performance to date, and I think he gets a finish against Jan Blachowicz. What's your take on this one?
I think if Izzy came in weighing 185 pounds, he'd beat Jan. I'm such a fan of him. And don't get me wrong, Jan Blachowicz, it's a fantastic story from his start, not even just in the UFC, but his start. I think he go 0-2 or 0-4 or something in his pro career.
One and 3, I believe.
Okay, so he had a poor start to his pro career. He had a poor enough for a shaky start, like we talked about in his UFC career. So to turn that around, to get like emphatic victories, to become the champ, is unbelievable. It's a hell of a story. However, there's a superstar in our midst, and that's Israel Adesanya. Yeah. He is. I looked. One of the things that I've tried to do over lockdown is study fighters. So I went back to Adesanya's kickboxing days, but then I looked at each of his UFC victories, and he gets better every single time. You look at his first few fights, and he looked really impressive. He looked at his fight with Anderson Silva, then midway, and he looked really, really good. Then you look at where I find he hit his stride, or even before that, he fought Kevin Gastelum, where he had to show heart and grit, where we hadn't seen that in him before. Then he took another jump where he put away, I think, one of the most underrated fighters ever to fight, which is Robert Whittaker.
100%.
And then and Paulo Costa, where he made it look really easy against a high level contender. So I think this guy is just he's the cream of the crop. Really, he is. He's the superstar. He has the skill set. His fight IQ is through the roof. He is constantly reading and noting tendencies, and then he exploits those tendencies. Shown knockout power with both hands, both legs, and more impressive than that, because he comes from such a high level kickboxing background. A nightmare to take down, and very, very good to get back to his feet. I don't think Jan. Just tell me a way where he wins. I cannot see it.
I mean, it's the puncher's chance theory. That's his route to victory, but it's hard to see.
I think Izzy is just far too smart to get anywhere close to danger with this, unless he throws something that is super awkward that Izzy is just not, that he's not used to seeing. That's the only way. But even at that, I can't see it. Not in a million years. I think Adesanya comes out, is patient like he always is. I think he starts damaging. He's noting noting tendencies from feints, and he exploits the weaknesses that he sees in front of him. I think it's a bad knockout.
Very good. And I suppose with Adesanya and given a victory here, does he become the biggest superstar in the sport? Like we've waxed lyrical on the man. There is, of course, Conor McGregor is still there, but does he become he might not become the biggest pay-per-view draw, but is he the biggest superstar the sport has ever seen with a victory here?
I think as long as Conor McGregor's in the sport, he's going to be the ultimate superstar, and would that's a given. But I never thought it'd be a close second.
Yeah,
really, I didn't. And now we have Israel Adesanya. Like, everybody's interested to see him fight. Everybody's interested to see him talk. Everybody wants to see him do his thing. What's always a really good insight is to look at the countdown shows. I'll be really interested to see come tomorrow what views the countdown shows have. You know what I mean? But his star is really, really rising. And to me, I think he's just going to get better, because he's he's a vast experience in martial arts, but he's still relatively, I wouldn't say new, but he's by no means a seasoned vet on his way down or declining or anything like that in MMA. He's improving every single time.
Yeah, and of course 100 wins across boxing, kickboxing, and MMA as a professional, which is phenomenal. Only 6 losses. Does the Jon Jones fight happen? Does it have to happen? Is this a legacy fight, and is it the biggest fight the UFC could put on in the near future, or at any point in the history of the UFC?
For me, it has to happen, but MMA things don't always go to plan. But for me, it has to happen. I don't. Can you imagine Israel Adesanya going out becoming a double champ and then deciding to go up to heavyweight to fight Jon Jones? That would be unbelievable.
It would end the GOAT talk forever.
It would, but do you think there's a higher possibility or probability of Jones coming back down to 205 to perhaps defend the belt that he had to give up? I think that would probably be more realistic.
I think that Jones has put on too much weight. And unfortunately, I see this only happening if Jones picks up that title. And I don't see Jones picking up the heavyweight title. I think Jones gets knocked off his perch and Izzy isn't as fascinated by the fight. And it's not about legend status anymore. He might at some point move up the heavyweight and take on whoever's holding the crown. But I think Jon Jones has to pick up the heavyweight title for Izzy to really chase this fight.
As great as Israel Adesanya is, there's harder fights at light heavyweight for him.
Yeah.
Much harder fights, in my opinion, than what he's facing on Saturday night. But as far as him going to heavyweight, the only way I'd like to see him going to heavyweight is for Jon Jones, who we know can make 205.
Yeah.
Him to go fight someone like Francis, him to go find someone like Curtis Blades, Derek Lewis, Cyril Gane. Yeah, that's crazy in my opinion. Now, is he good enough to knock anyone out that with 2 arms and 2 legs? He is, but I just don't want to see him going now. I love the path that he's on. I would love to see him fight Jon Jones at 205. Who knows? Jon Jones could go to 205 like you predicted. I think he becomes champ there, to be honest. But let's just say you're right and he gets knocked out at heavyweight. Well, then all of a sudden the 205 return looks a lot better, especially with a superstar after coming into his division, as I'm sure he thinks.
Yeah.
So I think we could see him at 205.
Yeah, very possible. And of course, these are all hypotheticals down the road. For now, we do have Israel Adesanya versus Jan Blachowicz for the light heavyweight title. We are both absolutely buzzing for this card. We've been talking about it for weeks. We are going to let you go on that note, guys. We have to do our bets of the week really quick.
Bets.
So we're going to let you go first. I've done all the picks first. What is your bet of the week, Brian?
Okay, so like I said, my actual money is going on this. So now we're going to see some serious bets. Right, so I'm going with a treble, and I'm going with a pretty safe treble in my opinion. I think you put money on this, you're coming home with money. And mine is Izzy to win, Nunes to win, and Makhachev to win. If you want to be, if you want to lengthen your odds, put Izzy and Nunes for knockouts and put Makhachev for decision. But I'm just going to go with 3 wins on this, Paul. Like I said, I want to see I've made money on betting in fights, but I've done it through compiling week by week. So I'm going to start with this.
Yeah, for me, I'm going a little bit more out there. Even though my record is better, I'm chasing you on the bet stats. So I'm going to a little bit of a wild pick again this week. Well, not wild, I believe in it. But I also have a treble. I have Askarov, Adesanya, and Casey Kenny all to win.
Yeah, I think 2 of those fights are tight. I think Kenny and Cruz is a great fight, and I think Askarov and Benavidez is another phenomenal fight that we didn't even get to mention because there's so many good fights. But yeah, I think that's a risky one, Paul. But let's see if it pays off. Look, you're going to get much better odds than I have. Let's put it that way.
I'll be playing catch up on the betting stakes for sure. Listen, guys, thank you very much for tuning into the show. We will be back next week with another phenomenal fight night card. Tune in on Saturday night, UFC 259. And be sure to give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. Thank you.